All right. Okay, so I've started recording for today's lecture session for your own reference and for those who may not be able to join our lecture session today. All right. Okay. So welcome back, everyone, to TT3013, Computer Ethics and Social, with another topic to be discussed with me as part of the slots of topics that you are going to receive from me anyway. Okay. So this is the second topic that we were discussing under my coverage. So today we are going to discuss, or at least you will get some knowledge and understanding regarding ethical issues, but in the context of computing, okay, which will be something that is relatable to all of us here, especially all of us here who are practitioners in computing. Okay, doesn't matter for whatever role that it is, either a developer, a software developer, a programmer, an analyst, or IT professionals in general. There are ethical issues that we've discussed last week. Some of the ethics nature that is related to us in computing field, but today we will look into an extension of that, where we looked into some of the more practical issues that will make more sense to all of us as computing experts, okay, or us in the computing field, and we will look into a very general guide in terms of how can we resolve, or how can we handle these ethical issues, some of these common ethical issues related to our field. Okay, but before we start looking at the content of today's topic, a little bit of housekeeping just to update everyone. One, I was informed that the rubric for your group project, case study group project reports, and also for the rubrics for presentation. Rubric means the items and the criteria that we consider in the evaluation or the assessment, okay, where we evaluate your case study reports and also your presentation, is already available in UKM Folio. But before, I was informed that you can only view the presentation rubric and not the report. So I fixed that. So I've combined both of the rubrics together. So you should be able to access, or to have the view to look into all of the rubrics, particularly for the case study. All right. So do update yourself in UKM Folio to make sure that you are aware of the rubrics, because that will help you in preparing and completing your group projects together. Okay. So that is one. The second one is, this week we have all groups have not all groups, but our tutorial have started this week. So all the tutorial session is already done for this week, Alhamdulillah. So thank you for everyone who has joined in on the tutorial. Just as a reminder, all students, according to your sets, please attend your tutorial sessions, okay? Because that is your one-to-one discussion, one-to-one in a sense, online with your dedicated kind of advisor for this course, okay? So those in the sets of my set, those in Dr. Masniza's sets, and those in your Dr. Yazrina's sets, do make sure that you attend all of the tutorial sessions, even though if it is not your group presenting or your case study is being discussed on that day. But I highly encourage that everyone to attend, because that is where you get a more practical, and you get to discuss on a real case setting with that dedicated with your the lecturers for your set, okay, for your tutorial set. All right. So please be aware of that. If you missed out on this week's tutorial in whichever sets that you are, please make sure that you join in the next session. Okay, so we will also have our semester break next semester. So there won't be any sessions next semester. And the following week after that, after a semester break, that for the topic of discussion for that week will still be with me. For the third topic under my coverage, another 2 weeks will be the remaining two topics. Okay, and then after that, I will pass over to Dr. Yazrina, and she will continue with the rest of the topics. Okay, tutorials will remain on the dedicated schedule. until all groups or all of the case studies for that particular set is complete. All right. Okay. So if you have any inquiries, if you have any issues, feel free to communicate via our group. Okay. I would highly advise to use a group rather than probably a direct message or PM directly to me as a coordinator if it is something that may be relatable to all. With regards to the course, if you have any questions with the assignments, with the group projects, okay, with your tutorial and so forth, please post it in the group first, okay, unless it is a personal issue on your part, then you can contact me directly. But if not, please use the group so that one, if it is a problem that we as the lecturer can, or the coordinator will advise, at least other students who probably have the same problems or issues can have the solution as well. Secondly, if I, for some accidentally probably miss out on your message because I receive a lot of message for different tasks, I may miss out in between. At least Dr. Yazrina or Dr. Masnisa can help out to address or to respond to your inquiries. Okay, so that is some housekeeping of how we handle or the operation of this course. All right. Now, without further ado, let's discuss further on today's topic, to discuss some ethical issues that's very related to computing, and some more of a practical ways on how to handle it. All right. Okay. So before we begin, just a little bit of recap of what you should already have an understanding, or you have been informed of ethics theory, and this is during Dr. Masniza's topic. So we have an evolution of ethics theory. So we have, in terms of the concept of ethics that they formalize, okay, from ancient Greek, very, very long time ago, all the way to that has evolved, all to where we are now in modern times, okay? So just a little bit of recap. In ancient times, okay, before in ancient Greeks. And why do we refer to ancient Greeks? Because it is the recorded kind of evidence of how ethics have been formalized. And what do I mean by formalized? It means that it has been recorded, it has been structured, okay? And so ancient Greeks is the reference that is highly referred to within the context, within the field, or within the topics of ethics. Okay, so during the ancient times, we will probably have heard of some philosophers called Socrates, called Plato, called Aristotle. Okay, so these are philosophers who have formalized and document and record and structure the concepts of ethics. Now, just a little bit overview of how it was before. So anything that is on ancient Greek and all from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle is within the concept or the theory where it's called teleology. Okay, so Socrates started off by saying ethics is moral values. Okay, our virtues as a human being. Okay, our moral values to be human, with intelligence. Okay. So with intelligence and some with natural intelligence, instinct, our natural instinct as human that God has given. So we have moral values. So Socrates identify or define ethics to be associated or related to moral values, which means instinctively we do not like to be harmed. And so our moral values is to keep safe, to keep ourselves safe, and that safe ethical is to also ensure that other peoples are also safe. Hence, our moral values that we want to make sure that we do not cause any harm. Okay, so that is Socrates' simple kind of philosophy on what defines as ethics. And then we also have Plato. So Plato evolved that from Socrates. So Plato refers to Socrates, which means that according to Plato, ethics also includes or must be or is defined as moral values of a human. But Plato adds on that the ethics should also include learning, which means the intellectual. where we are educated in several knowledge domain, to have the knowledge and have the intellects, and that inform and that also influence our ethics values, okay, or our ethics nature, okay. And then after Plato, there's another also philosopher, of course, called Aristotle. Not after, but Aristotle provides also based ethics based on Socrates. But from Aristotle's perspective, ethics must include also, with moral values, the personality. And what does it mean by personality? Is moral value, which means that we have it internally. We know internally in terms of our natural instinct and mind, plus our action. Okay, and so our moral values internally plus our action that needs to match with that moral value, where it expands the good value. So this is ancient times teleology. So it may seem abstract. It may seem something that is intangible, something that's very instinctual. So it's not, there's no perfect structure, step by step, or a simple to refer kinds of guides, okay? So it's very abstract, it's very high level, it very much, whatever the structure or the formalization of ethics, we should refer to moral values plus learning, or moral values plus personality. Whatever that reference is in terms of it's defined, is not something that we as modern time community, okay, members of the community, can immediately refer to or can comprehend easily, okay, straightforwardly. And so because of that, the evolution of ethics with the modern times is now moved and shift into the theory of deontology. Okay, so what we are practicing now, or what you understand about ethics now, as modern times humans in our society now, are actually based on or according to deontology theory. Okay, so this is just as a recap on the um, ethics theory that you already have known from earlier on, some of the topics that Dr. Masnisa has covered. So just again, another recap between teleology and deontology. So teleology focus on consequences. So what consequences means that what will happen if something is not done ethically. So the focus has always been to be careful because you wanted to, the individual would want to take care of the impact of it. Okay, so we want to ensure that it's a good consequences, it's not going to cause harm, and so we focus on that, the impact. And so we are guided by whatever our ethical action, our ethical consideration is guided by making sure that the impact, the end game or the consequences is good. Okay, so whatever we do, we always think of the consequences. That is teleology approach, okay, thinking. And then deontology, more of what we are more familiar with naturally, all of us, since we are in the modern times, is that we focus on our responsibilities, our duties. So our ethical consideration, what we consider, what we believe, what we consider as good ethics is based on our responsibility and our duty. So the approach that falls under deontology theory is what we call Kantian. Okay, as compared to in teleology, the approach would be utilitarianism. Okay, so in the teleology approach, whatever our action is ethical if the consequences, okay, the outcome of it will bring happiness. Okay, so we decide on what action will be, what are the actions that we are going to take with the consequences that it is good by it brings happiness. Okay, so as long as it's happy, the action is considered as ethical. Okay, because the focus has been in consequences. But deontology, the approach is Kantian, where the approach ignores the consequences in terms of it doesn't matter if it brings happiness or not, as long as it is the action, or it is done with the context of being responsible. Okay, so why do I say, or why do we see that in modern times, our ethics is much more driven by deontology, has evolved into a deontology, is because it is much stronger to act on based on our responsibility, okay, because we cannot control how the effect will be, okay. So if you are being responsible, the effect, someone can be happy and someone may not be happy, okay, but you cannot control that. What you can control is making sure that the responsibility that you hold on to, you have done it properly, okay. So that is the Kantian approach, which is much more relevant, not relevant, but it is much more applicable in the setting of how we are in the modern times, okay. All right. Also to recap what we've discussed, and now this is to recap what we discussed immediately from last session, okay, last week, where in terms of code of ethics in ICT, so the code of ethics can be established from the angles of or perspective of all of us here as computing experts, from a professional perspective, or from a system users perspectives, okay. So in the case of all of us here, including yourself as students, we are all in the field of computing. So we are all professional, but at the same time, we are also system users, okay, which means that as compared to probably any individuals or set of people who are not in the field of computing, so they may can see or view ICT, or how they conduct themselves ethically in ICT, would probably be more dominant as system users. Okay, so the code of ethics that we've discussed last week is for those covering both professional and system users, but it is relevant to us, all of us here, because we are in computing field. Okay, so we're all computing experts. Okay, which means that professionally we are IT professionals, but being a user also to the IT, which means that we are also system users. All right. So now, last week we discussed about code of ethics. So the code means that what would be our reference, what would be our guide in terms of general guides as IT professionals, okay, as computing professionals, all right? So this week, for computing and ethical issues, we are extending that, but looking at a more real situations or scenarios where, as IT professionals, we are conflicted. There's a dilemma that can happen in the ethical aspect as computer professionals, okay, or computer experts here, right? But before we go and look at the examples, the common dilemma that happens in computing ethics, just a little more understanding on the fundamentals of reasoning. Why do we need to learn about computer ethics, particularly in our position as IT professionals or computing professionals, and also as a user, okay, of the IT users, okay? So obviously, for obvious reason, we need to learn about computer ethics as a guidance. Now, we need some form of guide in order to make sure that we fulfill that instinct of our moral value, but in much more focus and much more design in the context or in the perspective of computer. Okay, so we need that as a guide. We also need to learn about computer ethics, and we need to know about the computer ethics so that we can take advantage of the values of the ICT fully, without not without, but to gain all the advantages of what the value of ICT fully, by doing that ethically. Okay, by making sure that we get all the advantage of the value of the ICT in the ethical way, where it will not cause harm to anyone, to community, and to the community. All right, so that is another kind of like the baseline as to reasoning why we need to know and learn about computer ethics. And then when we know about the computer ethics, because professionally we are IT professionals, which means that our behavior and the nature of how we think, how we take action, is very much within the norms of how the nature of computing or IT works. Okay, and so as a human being involved and be part of this community of computer experts, we need to make sure that as computing experts, we have good values and also positive attitude among our community of computing experts. Okay, right? And then we do need to also learn about computer ethics because it brings benefits to us individually, internally, that it improves our quality of moral value, specifically when we are dealing with the computing field. Okay, and then we also learn computer ethics in order to allow us to create as a computing professionals with the responsibility and the knowledge and the skills and the expertise in IT or computing to create an informative society with positive value. Okay, so there's a responsibility as those with the knowledge and skills in computing. And so with that comes power, and with that power comes responsibility. And what responsibility, the ethical responsibility that we have is that we are responsible to ensure that we help or we support the creation of informative society with positive value. Okay, so that is also the reasoning why we learn computer ethics. And then more generally, when we know about or when we have good understanding and awareness of computer ethics, and as we become the computing or the IT professionals working in a team, working in an organization, that ethic helps, the good computer ethics helps you to become a member of a productive working environment. Okay, so that's also the reason. And then the other reasons is to avoid, it helps to avoid social issues related to moral and ethical and computer ethics. Okay, so we are IT professionals, and professionally we are ethical, and the professional ethics helps to form the way how we act, the way how we think, to also avoid social issues that is related or that is influenced or affected by uh, our profession as computer or IT experts, okay, or professionals, right? So there is a link between how we behave or how we act ethically as a computing and IT professionals, and relate that to how the social setting of the entire our society and our community. Okay, so we have to be responsible as the computer experts to be ethical so that we can avoid social issues in our society that is impacted, that is very much influenced by computing, right? And then finally, another reasoning why we as computer and IT professionals need to learn about computer ethics is so that we can be disciplined and good in our profession. Okay, so that is several kind of underlying reasoning why, when we talk about ethics, specifically as computer or IT professionals or experts, why ethics needs to be very close to us professionally, okay, as someone who has the knowledge and skills. Now, with those underlying kind of philosophy as to the need to learn about computer ethics, it is computer ethics or ethic values in our field, okay, in our professional field, is not as straightforward and easy to comprehend. Okay, now we are computer experts. We know how the computer works. We have the skills, we have the knowledge. Okay, we have the we are IT savvy. Okay, in a sense, because that is our field of knowledge, right? However, in general, public who may have less knowledge and skills about IT as compared to us, the professionals, may find it difficult to understand computer in ethical issues. Okay, so what kind of difficulty with the computer ethical issue that is much more general to the public that may have that little or no knowledge about ICT, okay, or computer? So first, those with less knowledge, public in general, may not be able to see the impact and the social problem caused by IT. Okay, so we're going to look at some dilemma, computing dilemma, ethical dilemma related to ICT. But as a public, as anyone in public, they may have difficulty to understand or to see or to realize the kind of impact and social problems that can be caused by ICT. Okay, another reason why public or those who are not non-IT professionals may find it difficult to understand computer ethical issues is because they don't have the knowledge. So they're unknowledgeable. So it could be they're unknowledgeable completely, okay, almost zero understanding of the computer ethics, or just probably ignorant, okay, less ignorant, or probably they know some of it, but they may not know fully in terms of the impact, in terms of what is right, what is wrong, ethically related to computer or ICT, right? And then the public, those who are less knowledgeable or may not have the awareness about computer ethics, are not aware of cyber laws, which means there are proper legal rules and regulations that is related to computer to maintain that related to computer ethics. It's just that they're not aware, okay, and hence they may have broken the law unintentionally, okay, due to non-awareness and also not knowledgeable enough, okay. And then public, another reason public may feel or in their experience of any unethical issues related to computing or ICT, they may find it difficult because they may not receive direct impact when certain issues or certain unethical situation happens. Okay, so several sections of the public, because it does not affect them, hence they don't understand or they may not be aware of the ethical issues related to ICT, right? And then it can also be problematic for the public, individuals or public who have very less knowledge or no knowledge at all related to computer ethics, is maybe because just generally they are not exposed or influenced by the power and the usage of computer. Now, this may seem unrealistic to us. Again, we have to bear in mind these are issues that will affect or difficulties that are affecting individuals or set of community that is not ICT experts like all of us, okay? And so we may find it unrealistic to feel that there's an individual or there are any people who are not exposed to the use of computers, okay? But there are, okay? And so when you have this set of people who may have less exposure to or the influence of the use of computer or ICT in general, and then when they receive or when they do get that exposure, they may not know how to utilize or how to respond the right or the wrong way in terms of responding or using ICT, okay? And that creates difficulty for these sets of people within the public community to make sure that they remain ethical in their use of the computer or ICT. All right. So that is the general kind of like overview. First, we've recapped several points that we've discussed in previous topics. Okay, so a little bit of recap on the theory, Okay, very, very complex way of understanding ethics theory. And then we've moved slowly to last week's topic, where we start to try to understand ethics in a much more practical way. How it can be understood more easily in practical way is when we zoom in to look into the ethics related to our field, which is in computing or ICT. All right. So we've looked at the reference, the guide that is available in terms of the code of ethics, okay, for ICT. So we've done that, and then we also retouch again on the reasoning as to why we need to know computer ethics, okay, why we need to remain ethical as computer experts or computing professionals. And then because we are professionals, then we can probably relate and understand. But we also need to understand that the computer ethics may not be easily understood by everyone. Okay, and so we are aware that there are people who does not have the same skill sets and knowledge as we are as IT professionals or computing professionals. And so they may have difficulties to understand about the computer ethics. And why is it important for us to acknowledge and to know that the public may find it difficult for computer ethics? Because we, as the experts, are also involved with the member of publics who are not experts. Okay, we as professionals will come to deal with individuals who are not IT experts. Okay, and so to maintain ethics, it needs to be from all perspectives, from all stakeholders, from all the people involved in that setting. Okay, and so as professionals, as IT professionals, we need to understand the difficulty so that we can uphold our responsibility as the one who has the knowledge and who has the skills to ensure, to support and to ensure with the public, to ensure that ethics is maintained, good ethics is maintained. Okay, so that is what we've discussed so far. Now we're going to look at several ethical dilemma that is common, or that is probably, and not just common in a sense that it always happens, but it is something that we can relate, okay, in our experience as computing or ICT experts, professionals. Okay, so we look at the first dilemma. The first ethical dilemma is a dilemma where we are in this conflicting kind of situations to determine between the issues related to the economy, so money parts, and social, which means the impact of that ICT, okay, or that for the use of that ICT. So what do I mean by this dilemma of economy versus social issues? So we wanted to maintain being ethical, but there are situations where it's difficult for you to determine the ethical consideration, which is considered, or what should be considered as ethical in our decision, in our action, when we are faced with a situation where we need to find a balance between issues related to economy and versus social. Okay, so where is this dilemma coming from? Okay, so we know ICT or computer helps to make tasks more efficient. Okay, it helps makes tasks much more faster. Okay, and so ICT or computer has that value. Okay, it can be good. So with the computer, with the ICT, when we have all of these tools, okay, that allows us to, or that allows the work or tasks to be more efficient, business but much better, what it does is it has the potential to create new jobs. Okay, so for example, as we are now in modern times, we have all this new emerging sophisticated technology. We have all these AIs, automations, okay, and because of these technology, computer and ICT, new jobs are created. Okay, because with specific technologies such as automation, which means we create new jobs of those who are skilled in managing or in using or in developing that technology. Okay, so new jobs are created, right? So that's good. But at the same time, by this new job created by this new exciting and sophisticated technology, there may be jobs that has existed before become lost or obsolete. And so that creates unemployment. There will be people who are going to be unemployed. So that's a social issue. Why? Because when the society unemployment rate becomes higher, when people who have lost their jobs or become jobless becomes higher, that causes social problems. Okay, that causes social issues, and that was caused by ICT. Okay, but at the same time, the same ICT creates something positive as well. Okay, from an economic point of view, creates new jobs. Okay, which means there's a demand for a job for new skill with a new skill set with a new knowledge. Okay, so dilemma. How are we going to maintain the ethical consideration or value of this that is caused by, or that is the impact from the technology, okay, or ICT. So that's one example. Another example that where ethical dilemma can happen in an ICT usage between the economy and social issues is versus social issues is when we know that the technology can help to make or perform tasks easily. Okay, so or make it easier to perform the task. Okay, either make it more efficient, make it more accurate, make it much faster. Okay, but it may also put more pressure. Okay, so for example, you have a computing of, let's say AI can help make some of the tasks faster. So before, let's say a task before the use of AI technology, it may take probably several days to complete, okay, the task. But with AI, we can solve that within a few seconds, for example, okay? Good, that's a good thing, okay? Which means that productivity can increase, which means that we can do more, okay, with the use of this ICT. So before, let's say the productivity is with what the older technology, we can only perform, let's say, 50%, but with AI, we can now perform 200%, example. So if we look at from a positive light or positive perspective, that's good. More productivity, more money, which means better pay, better good things, okay, that the organization can have, that we individuals can have. But it can also put more pressure. Now it is expected to do more things because it can be done faster. We are expected to do the task double, triple of the task, and that creates pressure. And when that pressure, bear in mind, we may not be pressured. The technology itself may not be pressured. Technology is technology. It's not a living thing. But the people involved, the expert, all of us as professionals, okay, computer professionals, IT professionals, we are still human. And so when we have that pressure, it can impact us in our social setting because, for example, it may cause family problems. Okay, so let's say because expected pressure, more tasks needs to be done. Okay, so you feel as an individual, as a human being, you start to feel pressure, and then that can cause problems when you go home. It can cause problems, mental health as individuals, and when you have a sick or you're not having a fit mental in terms of our health, we're not healthy mentally. Us as individual may not function well in our community or in our society. Okay, so that's a social issue that was caused by ICT. So ICT has good in economic point of view, but it can cause bad to the social aspect. All right, that becomes ethical. So that becomes an ethical dilemma, right? And then another example of how there's an ethical dilemma when we look from economic and social issues is we know that computers relate with new opportunity, modernization, okay, but it can create social bias, unaffordable. What it means is computer, yes, can create new opportunities, can make things work better, it can modernize our society or community, but it may widen the gap of social bias with those who may not have access to the computer, okay, to the ICT, to the newer technology, okay. So what it happens is the new technology is good because it modernizes society, but only for those who have access to that technology. To those who do not have, that creates a social issue because it widens the gap of those who can get the opportunity with those who may not be able to get that opportunity. Okay, so that creates an ethical dilemma by this ICT, causes by the use of ICT. All right, so what other ethical dilemma? So that was an example of ethical dilemma when we compare the dilemma that is within the perspective of something that brings in positive value in terms of economy versus how it will impact the social, okay, social perspective, right? Another ethical dilemma that can happen is issues related on individual routine or practice, okay, exercise or practice, all right? So there's an ethical dilemma in, for example, in how our routine and how our practice in password protection, okay, in backups, in doing backups, in being aware of privacy, in being aware of when we make hard copies and etc. So these are individual practices, okay, we all have our own individual practices related to ICT, okay, that can cause dilemma. For example, we know that password protection is needed. All of us, we are all computer experts. We know that the easiest protection or the simplest way of protection is password. But we do have a dilemma of having that password, of not following the recommended way of us doing the password for full protection. One example, it is recommended, or a good practice in keeping the password is making sure that we change our password on a frequent basis. Okay, so not using the same password for years. Okay, do that. But not every individual uses that. Okay, and so why it becomes an ethical dilemma? It becomes an ethical dilemma because then you choose to not follow the security of it because you would choose to probably want something that would be easier to you as an individual. So it would be easier to not frequently change password because you may determine that, one day I'm going to forget the passwords. It's not possible to keep track of the different passwords. It's a hassle to keep changing it. And so you are using password protection, but it may not be according to the right way. And that becomes a dilemma. You create a setting where there is a potential of unethical situations that can happen, right? So that is the second type or common kind of ethical dilemma that can happen. And then we can also see or experience ethical dilemma in software development issues. So this might be relevant to you now, as all of you are right now doing your final year projects, okay? So your final year projects, you need to either develop systems or applications or software, or you deal with using software as part of your project, okay? Either it's an experiment, either it's to develop the algorithms that you have designed for your final year projects, okay? So there are issues in software development that can cause ethical dilemma. Okay, so what kind of an example where you can end up in an ethical dilemma, particularly in software development issues, is, for example, the dependence to the expert, trustworthy, moral values, quality. So when we develop software, as a software developer, we are the experts. Okay, so we have the power to determine how the software is going to be developed. Okay, and so our stakeholders involved in the software development will need to put that trust and believe that we as the experts have the moral value and the quality to produce a software, to develop a software that is good, that will benefit the clients or the stakeholders who are the users of the software. Okay, so that dependence and that trustworthy, okay, that dependence to the computer experts or computer professionals as the expert can cause an ethical dilemma for one, the software engineers, okay, or developers, okay, where they will feel that because everything they are the experts, and so they have the power, and so they can dictate what the customer wants, okay, what their stakeholder wants. So they feel that because I'm the expert, I can tell, okay, without considering what will be how the value will be to the user, okay, or the stakeholders, right? So that can create an ethical dilemma. Yes, you are the expert. Yes, you should be the one responsible to make sure that the software that you developed is good according to the clients, okay? But at the same time, you can be in a dilemma where the client may rely on you, hence you are the one who's doing the decision making and to dictate the user. Okay, in that sense, you can find a dilemma where you are not following what the client wants. You are more telling them and doing it according to what you want as an expert, because the client is fully dependent on you. And so there's a dilemma, because as a as software engineers, developers, IT professionals, in whatever that we do that is involves or is developed for the use of the user, we need to consider their rights and also their requirements and also what they consider as value to them. Okay, so that can be a situation where we can be in a situation where we have ethical dilemma. Okay, and then another example of a situation where we can be in an ethical dilemma in the setting or in the context of software development issue is when users could not afford to buy software license, hence they use pirate software to catch up with the technologies. And the user here in this example is us as the developer. Okay, now this may be, hopefully, this is not something that you are practicing now, okay, as you are using many different tools and softwares to develop your final year projects, okay? But this is something that is common in our practice, particularly when we do not have the means or the access to use the software legally. We start to look for alternatives, and sometimes the alternatives is illegal version of it, and that is where we may be faced with an ethical dilemma. What is the ethical dilemma here? We know that it is not right to use pirate software, but we also need to use that software, but we do not have the means. Okay, so that becomes an ethical that can cause an ethical dilemma in software development. Okay, and then other ethical dilemma. So another situation or scenario where there can exist ethical dilemma caused by ICT usage is from a context of management and staff. So this is a situation where you will be faced with ethical dilemma because there are various powers and authority in an organization, in the organization that is related to the use of ICT. So for example, let's say you are in that development team, okay, you're developing a software, you have programmers, you have analysts, and so you have a group of programmers, and you may be faced with a conflict with a colleague who are also another programmer, and because of that conflict, the actions that has been taken is when, due to that conflict, your colleagues have probably destroyed the codings or the programs, okay, because they were not satisfied with anything that causes the conflict, okay. So that creates an ethical dilemma, where you mix up unprofessional or individual conflicts, okay, personal conflict, not individual, personal conflict, into your actions, okay, in this case, working as a professional in an organization, okay, and then you use the ICT to, not you, but probably the colleagues that has a problem with you, have decided to uh, punish you by destroying. So using an ICT to destroy what you have done, okay, just to get back at you, right? So that creates an ethical dilemma. That creates a situation where unethical actions or unethical consideration was carried out. And it was successfully carried out because there's ICT being used there. So in the example of when you have conflict with a colleague, and then the colleague take action by erasing or destroying or corrupting your work, okay, and corrupting your work in your computer or in the server, okay, so that corruption can be realized by using the ICT by the colleagues, okay. So that's an example where ethical dilemma can happen, okay. Another example where it's an ethical dilemma that is caused within the context of management and staffing is the situations where your supervisor or your manager forces you to break rules or principles in writing the program. So writing a program that can access probably that probably copies other code of programs that is protected, or writing a program or developing a program that was intended to be used for illegal purposes, okay, but you were forced to do it. So you as an employee may find yourself to be in an ethical dilemma of following orders from your manager, but at the same time, knowing and understanding that what is being asked of you in terms of using the ICT, in this case, to write that program, is for unethical or illegal purposes, right? So that is another example or scenario where you can be faced with ethical dilemma. And then another situation is in situations where in computing processing issues, okay? So for the ethical dilemma that can happen related to the processing of that information that is being done in a setting where there's cheating to the clients, or there is actions that is considered as untrustworthy, okay? So doing the operation that involves untrusted software and hardware, which then causes you to be unable to deliver the service, okay? So that's an ethical dilemma. So this is different than the previous dilemma where you probably use pirated software. So this it's not a pirated software, but probably you use an open source software that is, the source of it is untrusted, okay? And you use that, and that causes the processing of the information or processing using these ICT becomes untrustworthy. Hence, it may not be able to produce the outcome that is needed. And if that outcome is a service that you as a computer experts or professionals need to deliver as a computer service to your customer, but because you're using untrusted software and hardware, then it may not be able to be delivered as intended and as expected, right? So that creates an ethical dilemma, okay? Another example is for ethical dilemma in the computer processing issues is when there's a delay in delivering the output. Okay, so that causes ethical in dilemma in that context of processing. Okay, and then other types of or other scenarios where you can be faced with ethical dilemma is in terms of work environment issues. So what do we mean by ethical dilemma that can happen in the work environment issues is when you are in the setting, in your organization, in your working environment where you are being monitored by the employer. So let's say you are working in a company where they have put in the policy that everything that you do will be recorded or monitored. Your work will be monitored very closely. That would include, for example, any phone calls that you take, any movement, any activities. Okay, so that policy of using ICT for the work environment can cause dilemma where it can be conflicting to any acts or legal aspect of your rights as an individual, your rights to personal information, your rights to have your privacy, okay, in the office or in the work environment. Okay, so that causes ethical dilemma. And then another scenario where we faced with ethical dilemma is also in the context of crimes that can happen cause or within the context of using the computer. Okay, so for example, fraud, scams that we hear almost on a daily basis that is getting more and more rampant nowadays. So how is it becoming an ethical dilemma? It can be an ethical dilemma because of the use of that computer that is facilitating the scam and the fraud and the hoax that is happening, and yet it is unreported. Okay, so there's a dilemma of this is a scam and it's not being reported where it should be because it is to help not causes further harm. Okay, but it's unreported, so there's an ethical dilemma there. The increasing cases of criminals who are using computers for the criminal actions is increasing and getting more complex, and that creates the ethical dilemma is why are these criminals are increasing, the cases are getting higher? Is it because they do not realize that it's not ethical? Is that awareness of the legality of what they do is low? Okay, so that creates an ethical dilemma. And then what other ethical dilemma? We can be faced with ethical dilemma in the context of data collection, storage, and access. Okay, now this is also situations where it can create ethical dilemma when we are not knowledgeable enough, okay, that how we handle the data and information ethically, okay, and particularly when the information is being collected, stored, and accessed electronically or digitally. Okay, and so what kind of ethical dilemma that can happen? It can happen where it relates to are we protecting that information in terms of its privacy, confidentiality, and accuracy by using these ICT, okay, by using the technology. So since we are collecting and storing and access everything electronically, using computer, using the network, using cloud services, and so forth, how are we securing, how do we maintain our ethical consideration by ensuring that all the data privacy is protected? Are we keeping it safe and making sure that it's confidential? Are we making sure that the information is accurate? Okay, so that creates ethical dilemma, especially when we are protecting all of that and doing all of that with as compared to or using technology that has a risk of tampering the privacy, confidentiality, and accuracy. Okay, so an example of where this can be an ethical dilemma. So we all use cloud nowadays, right? I'm using it. We are using clouds and we are using clouds in different types of clouds. Some we use from official. So for example, if you are using your Google Drive using your SISWA account, that's an official organization type of cloud where they have the protection. They are protected. Okay, so they have a layer of how that is protected under the organization. So it's a Google account, but it is a privately for UKM. Okay, which means that as we share amongst ourselves here within the UKM, within the domain for UKM, then it is protected. But at the same time, we are also using our Google Drive with our personal Gmail, for example. And sometimes we share the same documents in these two different drives. So one is professional protected, one is open, where it is on a personal storage. Okay. And so we may not realize that we've been facing with an ethical dilemma because we choose to do that because it's easy. It makes it easy. It makes it easy to access, probably because I am or I am logged in one of my devices using my personal Gmail, and then probably at the office or in class, I will use my official formal UKM Google account. And so rather than having to log out and log in my other device, mine as well, I share among these two accounts so I can access it from one or the other. Okay, so it's an easy technology allows me to be flexible and it makes it easy for me. But we can be caught in an ethical dilemma when suddenly I remember, or when I suddenly realize the information that I'm sharing between these two accounts may be information that is confidential. Okay, and so that creates an ethical dilemma. Do I want to make it easy for me to access and to manage, as compared to making sure that I follow the laws and regulations in terms of ensuring that the confidential information is protected properly? Okay, so that is an example of situations where you can be faced by ethical dilemma due to the use of ICT, particularly in the context where relates to data collection, storage, and access. Okay. And then other probably example or scenarios where we can be caught in the ethical dilemma in relation to the data collection, storage, and access is, for example, in terms of collecting the information or data. Is it necessary to collect all of the information, or only the ones that is related or that is required? Okay, so we will be faced with this ethical dilemma because part of the regulation of gathering information is that we can only have access to information, particularly confidential information, that has been permitted by the owner, and only the information that is necessary. Okay, if it's unnecessary, then we will be caught to be unethical if we still gather the information and not use the information. Okay, so that's an example of an ethical dilemma that can happen related to information. Okay, and as per that example, whatever that we use the information, either we collect, store, or access, the dilemma is that we must make sure that the source of that information or owner of that information gives us the permission to collect, to store, and to access. Okay, but sometimes either we accidentally did not ask for the permission. For example, if we individually know about that information, and so we easily thought, okay, so I can record this information, I can store, and I can access it without having to ask the owner, because I know, and I know that it's the correct, accurate, and the right information. Okay, so in that situation, it's faster and easier because you know the information, but it becomes an ethical dilemma when you did not ask for permission from the owner. Okay, so that can cause ethical dilemma, right? Okay, and then what are some other ethical dilemma that can happen? Is source exploitation. We can be in a situation where we have a dilemma ethically when the service or the computer service or the system is being exploited or interrupted. Okay, so there's an ethical dilemma of what we need to do in that situations where there are actions taken to our system's vulnerability has been exploited. So hacking happens. How do we respond? The services that we are providing or we are receiving is being interrupted. How? So we will be faced with that ethical dilemma. As a user, how do we respond? How do we expect the provider or the computer experts, okay, or the ICT professionals that provide that services to react, and at the same time, if we are wearing the hat as the IT professional or the service provider, how do we then respond and react to that to ensure that we maintain our ethical consideration? And then finally, another common or some of the situations where we can, using IT can cause ethical dilemma is in the context of client-vendor issue. So when there are conflict between the client and the vendor, what kind of products or services that provide is ICT services or products. Okay, so we can be caught in this ethical dilemma in the case of when there are issues between clients and vendor, and it can be in two ways depending on the role that we are in. So if we are the client that is receiving services or products from a vendor, an ICT products and vendor, there are certain expectations, and if the vendor could not meet or do not meet that consideration, then we are in the ethical dilemma. How do I respond for this ethically? Vice versa, if we are the vendor that provides, as an IT expert, okay, IT professionals, as the one providing the service, and engage with and link with the client, we have an expectation of what the client should provide to us. And if that is not fulfilled, then we are also in the midst of ethical dilemma. How do we respond as a vendor to respond ethically, okay, in that setting? All right, so that is 10 examples of 10 scenarios where ICT is being used. Okay, we can see all of that in the examples that I've shared with you on involves ICT, and we see that it can cause good. We believe, okay, as IT professionals and IT experts, of course, computers are good. Of course, the use of computers are good, okay, and should bring value, should bring things positive. But in practice of how ICT is being used, we can be in a situation where you can still look at, or you can still be faced with ethical dilemma, because the use of that IT can also cause potential issues or harm. Okay, so using ICT is good, but at the same time, we can be in a setting where we have a dilemma, okay, ethically. All right, so that is 10 examples or scenarios. Then out of all of that 10, actually, we can cluster, or we can see that the majority of ethical issues that happens are actually within these 4 types of ethical problems. Okay, one, problems about the privacy, okay, privacy aspect. And then another cluster or another big chunk of issues or ethical problems, okay, caused by ICT is in terms of information accuracy. Third, rights, okay. Rights means the authority or the authority and the what would be the word? The access, okay, the rights to access, to have the authority to either use or to either access certain parts, okay, of the ICT. Okay, so there are ethical issues or ethical problems in that setting. And then finally, one of the major problems, ethical problems caused by ICT usage is related to information access. Okay, so as a computer professionals, we can be facing misconduct, which means that we can potentially become an computer professionals that have done or that have been faced with unethical situations in these four main problems. Okay, privacy, accountability, which is the rights, privacy, which entails privacy of the information and accuracy of the information, and then accountability, license apart, and ownership aspect. These are related to information accuracy, rights, and also information access. Okay, so we're going to look slightly more details on some of this misconduct that can happen as we perform our duties and responsibilities as computer professionals. Okay. So an example of privacy or accuracy of information. Okay, so in ICT usage, when we use ICT, a conflict can arise when it involves a database that stores private information, okay, in an organization. So let's say you are a computer professional, let's say you're a database manager, okay? So your responsibility, so database administrator, okay, or database manager. So your responsibility is to manage and to take care of the database. Why you need to take care of it? Because the database is being used to store information and private information. Okay, so now conflict arises when you have that information that is in the database in your company, and your company is using that information to help in their marketing strategy. Okay, so conflict can arise. How it can arise? Because that information should be private, okay, in the database. And yet it's being used for marketing. Why is it conflicting? Because it conflicts because the information may not intended to be used for marketing. Okay, it was used for something else. Okay, but now since the information has a value to be used for marketing, then the organization may decide to use that information. Ethical issues can arise here where it may not be a problem, okay, but it can be conflicting in terms of the ethical consideration of that information was not intended for marketing, but we are still using it for marketing. Legally, it's okay because it is still within the same company. We are not selling the information. We are using the information that we store in our database owned by the same company, but used for marketing purposes. Okay, so legally it may not be a problem, but ethically it becomes a conflict because we know that ethically we can only use that information for what it is intended for, because that was what we asked the permission from the owner. Okay, so let's say you are collecting, let's say the system, the database collects or store information about their customer's address. Okay, so that's a private information, and the customer has given permission to collect or to store their address information. Okay, and they have given permission to store that information because we have informed our customer that this information is needed for us to collect and store for the purpose of keeping the record of you or the client as our customer. Okay, so the client has agreed, says, okay, you can collect and you can store and you can process my address because I am your customer. Okay, but now as a customer, let's say the marketing department now wants to use that information because they wanted to probably develop or market their new product. Okay, and they wanted to use the address to determine where the best, most strategic location for them to promote this product. Okay, and so they use that information. Now that is being used for new businesses. Okay, marketing is going to promote this to generate more new businesses. Now they're using that information for a different purpose as per the initial intention of that information that they have received that permission. So that creates conflict. Okay, so what form of conflict? Conflict, as mentioned before, to obey company policy where the information internally, any information internally within the organization, anyone in the organization can use. Okay, so marketing department says, I am also part of this business, I can use this information. But it becomes a conflict because it conflicts with the client's requirements, where the client has given permission only for the purpose of keeping it because we are the client, not to be used. It was not they did not give permission for it to be used for potential new businesses. Okay, so that becomes a form of conflict. So what to do? So in the situation, what needs to be done in terms of the privacy, in terms of the issue with rights, in terms of the 4 issues that we mentioned here: privacy, accuracy, rights, and information access. Okay, so what do we need to do? What can be done when we are in that situation, involved in this ethical issue? So what can be done is ethically, as a professional, as the one with the responsibility, we need to think of the benefits and consequences to the owner if their private information is kept or disseminated by organizations. Okay, so in this situation, what the common practice of IT professionals, when they will be in this conflict, they would first and foremost try to think of the benefits and consequences from the owner's point of view, and the actions that they can take to as a remedial or as an action to maintain ethics is to ask for permission for the use of it for other use. Okay, and so what they would put is, if you notice, when any organization asks for your information, they will put in a disclaimer that where they will let you know that the information may be used for other purposes, and they should mention what other purposes. And if you agree, then that's okay, right? So that is where some of the actions of what can be done in order to address these kinds of ethical issue. This example of ethical issue. Okay, so that is an example of the ethical dilemma that happens. And then when we have issues, and usually in the issues we have, in the ethical issues, we have issues related to the confidentiality, privacy, and then rights, and also accessibility. So on the rights, we have what we call ethical issues in terms of thinking from the accountability or responsibility aspect. So as the computer specialists or as the professionals in computing or ICT, we are responsible on the security, application, operability from the planning, design, implementation, testing, and documentation. So as professionals, we will be faced with issues related to every perspectives in the context of using ICT, either using the ICT as part of developing the technology, okay, developing the software or the system, or even the perspective of using the IT as the user, okay, although we are also the computing professionals. So for example, using the different tools, using the systems, okay, in an organization. So we may not only be the one developing systems, but there are systems that we are also as users, okay? And so the different ways how ICT usage happens in an organization for professionals, we can be faced with different ethical issues. And to address the ethical issues as professionals, one of the pillars that we need to believe, and we also need to uphold in order for us to remain ethical, is that we need to know that it is our responsibility on the safetyness or security and the operability, which means that the application needs to work, okay, from planning, design, implementation, testing, and documentation. So we are responsible for that, okay? So we have our ethical obligations to make sure that everything is safe and operating properly, okay? All right, so that is the first about the accountability and responsibility. And then another aspect related to accountability and responsibility as a professional is when we need to understand and be accountable and responsible in relation to any softwares or applications that are in the market. Okay, so we need, in order for us to be ethical, we need to know who should be responsible if any problem arises related to a piece of software or application. Okay, is it the programmer? Is it the dealer? Is it the manager? Is it the user who could not understand the capability of the software? Okay, so different roles in related to the use of IT as professionals, okay, as ICT or computer professionals, we need to know each of our roles and we need to know the responsibility of each of these roles. So when any issues happen or arises, in order to maintain ethical values, we need to understand and be sure of who should be responsible, accountable for the problem. Okay, it's because different roles will have different focus and also responsibility in relation to the software. Okay, so that is from the aspect of accountability. Next, we looked at the aspect of ICT usage, ethical issues in terms of license. So the rights, out of the four, we know that there is rights, which means authority to use the ICT. So authority to use the ICT is very much closely related to license. Okay, so why do we need license? Okay, so what is license actually? So license is needed because it gives the assurance to society, to the community, to people, assurance from professionals that the practice that the professionals have done is ethical. So it does not cause harm. It is good for the society. Okay, so society needs to be confident, needs to be reassured that the product or the ICT that they use is good, and good in the sense of it covers the ethic, everything is ethically good, okay, with the technology or the ICT. Okay, so the need for that assurance. So some of the example of kind of license, okay, so not necessarily just a computer license, but just license in general. So for example, medical license. So why doctors and nurses, hospitals need to have a license to give medical services. Okay, why doctors needs to have the license? Why? Because it gives the assurance to the public, okay, to the society, that if I go to you, I can trust that you are ethical, that you are not going to cause harm to me. Okay, so that license, that medical license, provide that confidence or assurance. Okay, so same goes for professionals in our field, in computer field. So we are used to know that there are several licenses for software. Okay, why does software needs license? Okay, because it gives the assurance that the software is good. It was developed properly. It went through the whole development life cycle properly. It will not cause harm. It will not cause harm to my computers. It will not cause harm to my life as a user of this license if this software is licensed. Okay, so why licensing? It provides high confidence, trustworthy, and efficiency towards the professional practice and output. And so it allows the professional to follow the guideline quality. It avoids the professional from any misconducts because the license controls that. By having the license, the professionals must act and must do their responsibility professionally, and that would include them to be ethical. So licensing is a form where they can enforce ethical consideration in the profession of the IT or computer professionals. Okay. Okay, so that is just a discussion on the different ethical issues that can happen in relation to ICT usage, in the relation of using technology and using the computer from two different angles, one as a professionals and another one as a user. Okay, so even as professionals, we are also users of ICT or computer. Okay, so we've looked at several issues, dilemma, and then we focus on discussing about those issues in the four kind of main or general issues and some examples of how that becomes issues. And then we've looked into licensing as a mechanism in order to control the the professional ethics particularly for field or in the area of ICT usage. So licensing in a setting where as professionals we will have certificates, and that is a form of license as a professional to uphold confidence and trustworthy that we as IT professionals are ethical, okay, of our responsibility as a professional. And the product itself has a license. ICT products or ICT technology services or products is licensed to give confidence that the software itself may not cause harm. Okay, the ICT itself may not cause harms. So licensing is a mechanism to uphold or to at least manage the ethical nature or consideration. And so it helps to lessen or minimize any situations where ethical dilemma can happen. Okay, so that is one approach for managing the ethical issues related to ICT usage, right? And then next we looked at how we can make ethical decisions when we are faced with ethical issues related to ICT usage. So one approach was licensing. What it does is it minimizes. It is not possible to eliminate ethical dilemma. It is not possible to avoid ethical issues related to ICT usage. So what we do is when there's the dilemma, when there's an issue happening, we need to make a decision that will ensure that we remain ethical. And how can we make that ethical decision? There are analysis that needs to be done. Now, the analysis can be done by considering these three perspectives. So first, we analyze the scenario that requires us to make decision ethically from the Ethics and Law Association. So Ethics and Law Association is we consider any law or regulation, legal aspect to be included in our decision. So we check and we refer, we are guided by any regulations. Okay, so that is quite straightforward, where we first look at all the rules and regulations, okay, the legal aspect of it, to help us in making sure that we make our decision to address any issues ethically. Another perspective is by looking at the formal and informal reason. Okay, so these are not three perspectives that we can choose either one. No, we have to consider all of this so that when we make the ethical decision, it is a comprehensive and a holistic ethical decision. So first we look at the ethics and law, okay, and then we also can include by looking at the formal and informal reason. Now, what is formal and informal reasons? We're going to look in the next slide, but what it does is it complements the legal aspect or the law's perspective. Okay, because sometimes when we refer to the law, there are some in the scenario that may not fit exactly with the law. Hence, we need to look for different angles, different perspectives, okay, to help in our ethical decision. So that is where we look at the formal and informal reason. And then apart from that, we also need to refer to any principles and theory of ethics to help us in our analysis to make an informed and just ethical decision. Okay, so this is focusing now on the formal and informal, just to give you an understanding. So you have the policy and the law. So anything of the policy and the law is what we consider as formal. So we refer to any document, any legal document, and law, regulations, policies, and we try to look at our scenario and see how we're going to make decision to address this scenario and try to look at the law and the laws and regulations. So that is formal. But to enhance or to support our decision based on the formal, we should also include the setting where we refer to the informal perspectives. to support the formal, to facilitate the formal, to enrich and enhance the formal reference that we use to make our ethical decision much more stronger. Okay, so what are the informal reasons? So the informal reasons could be a unique reason that is applicable to the individual, only to several individual or only one individual that is involved in that ethical issues, okay, or in that ethical dilemma. Okay, so we consider the perspective of the individuals that is involved, and that individuals may not be in the policy or the law, okay, because the policy and the law is much more universal, okay, applicable to all. But there are situations where it's very unique to that individuals that we want to consider, okay, to add on to the policy and law. And the formal could be isolated, okay, which means because it's so unique to that individual, it may be isolated and it may not be relate to the policy law directly, okay? So it's a different perspective, different factors that we take because it's unique for the individuals in that ethical dilemma. Then we use that to complement with the formal, okay? To help with the reasoning of the decision that we can make to make sure that it's still an ethical decision for the use of that ICT. The use of any ethical dilemma that happens in the use of that ICT. Okay, so that is the formal and informal. Okay, just to support that when we want to make ethical decisions, we need to analyze the scenario and what are the perspectives for us to analyze. We use the Ethics and Law, okay, Association, and those Ethics and Law Association is the formal. We also complement that with the informal theory, informal reason, and then we also can include by using the principles and the theory of ethics that we are well knowledgeable enough and to use that as part of the perspectives that will help us to make the right ethical decision. Okay, so that is on the formal. Okay, so the principles and theory. So use the principles of ethics as a guidance. Okay, certain action is considered ethical if other members of society take the same action together for the sake of similar interests. A certain action is considered ethical if it brings justice to the public. So these are general principles and theory of ethics that we have learned in the theory part, and we also see it is embedded in the code of ethics. Okay. All right. So now to conclude, okay, so we've discussed about the different ethical dilemma. We've discussed about the one of the approach in order to maintain or to minimize any of the ethical dilemma is through licensing. And then we've looked at to make ethical decision that we consider to analyze it from that three perspectives. Now to conclude, as an IT professionals, as a computer professionals, and that we have the responsibility, okay, as the IT professionals, and then as a user, as an ICT user, we have the rights as an ICT user. So whenever there's an ethical dilemma, whenever there's a conflict, we can make that ethical decisions by understanding or by referring the relationship between the rights of the user and the responsibility of the IT professionals. So what is the relationship? Okay, so the relationship between A is the professionals, B is the user. So the relationship between the professionals and the user is as per depicted in this diagram. Okay, so as a professional, what is the responsibility? We have the responsibility to develop software or technology or systems or application. So that's the responsibility of the IT professionals because we are the one with the knowledge and the skills. And then we have the relationship with our rights as a professional. So what is our right as a professional who develops the technology or software? We have the right to receive payment. Okay, so that is the relationship between the rights and responsibility of us as professionals. Okay, then we now look at the rights and responsibility of the user. So B is a user. So B has a right as a user to receive high quality software that has been developed by the professionals. Okay, so there's a relationship between the responsibility between two different roles. Professional responsibility relates or has a relationship with the user's rights to receive high quality software. And then the user has a responsibility. The user has a responsibility to make payment fairly and not use pirate software, okay, of the high quality. And so that responsibility relates to the professional's rights, which is to receive payment. So there's a relationship between these roles, one, the professional at the top, and then the user at the bottom, okay? And then between the individual roles, okay, among the same role, also has a relationship between the responsibility and rights, okay? So just to conclude, again, just to repeat, as a professional, we have responsibility and rights. So the relationship between the responsibility and rights can be reflected in responsibility to develop and as the expert of that technology, and have the rights to receive payments for the technology that has been developed. That is within the professional, the relationship between the responsibility and rights of a professional, and then between the responsibility and rights of the user has the right to receive high quality softwares and has a relationship with the responsibility of the user. In order to receive high quality, they must make the payment for the software and they do not use pirated software. So that is the responsibility and rights of the user. Okay. And then between the different users, they also have that link of relationship that is relate to the responsibilities and rights between these two different roles, professionals and user. Okay. So this is making the ethical decisions between rights and responsibility from a professional and user, and why this relationship is important, because it helps to make that ethical decision together with looking at the three perspectives. And why do they need to make this ethical decision? Because there are situations where the use of ICT can cause ethical dilemma, as what we've discussed, some of the examples of dilemma that can happen. Okay. And that is all the focus of what the discussion today is about, related to computing or ICT and ethical issues. Okay. All right. So any questions? Yes? No?
No.
No questions? All right. Okay. So if there's no questions on this session, then we can end our session. I think we slightly 10 minutes before the timeline of this course. But thank you for your attention. I will have this recording ready for you later once it's ready to be produced. Okay, when the copy of that video is ready, and then I will share it in UKM for your reference later. Again, if you do have any questions later on while you're doing your revision for the purpose of your exam later on, feel free to ask the questions. Okay. So just as a reminder, next week we don't have any class because it's a semester break, and then after that you will have another 2 topics with me. Also, just as a heads up, you will have your individual assignment with me, and this assignment is not only for my set of students of tutorial. This assignment is applicable to all students, all sets. Okay, so this is just a heads up. There will be a quiz that I will assign to you either the week after the semester break or the following week. So you have 2 more weeks that you will have a session with me. So it will be in either of that weeks. I have not determined it yet. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to make sure that you attend both of my classes, because you never know when I will provide or when I will do the quiz. Okay, the quiz will be done in class and you will be given, I think, 20 minutes or half an hour to do it. Okay, so I will use the class time. And so I will need for you to attend, because the quiz will be done during class and it will not be done outside of class. Okay, so please remind your friends who are not here, okay, to attend and to do the quiz when it is available for you. And when will it be available? It will only be available during my class. And when my class is going to be, it will be for 2 more weeks, which means 2 more Fridays, either the week after semester break or the following week after that. Okay, so I've made it very clear here verbally. I will also put in the notification and announcement in UKM Folio later. Okay, so this is just a reminder earlier on. Right, so if there's no questions, then I will have a good break, and I will see you after your semester break. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Doctor.
Aku salam, thank you, Doctor.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.